I have been threatening to do this for several weeks now. So I'm going to take a few minutes and explain to you how I make my pouring mediums, how I mix my paints, the difference between how I mix my pigments and how I mix my tube paints. And hopefully this will help you a little bit. The first pouring medium I'm going to cover, because I use two of them, is my Valspar Ultra and my Varathane polyurethane triple thick, and I mix those in a 3-to-1 ratio. And you're going to notice I have that on the top of my container, so I know which one is which when I pick it up. That's more the way I do it, doesn't mean the way it has to be done. Just like with anything, any pouring medium, any way that people do things, it's their way of doing things. This is how I do it. And if you find it useful, great, but the principles are pretty much the same. My 3-to-1, I have a ladle, and that's one part. So when I talk about parts, it doesn't matter what your parts is. It's just as long as they stay consistent for what you're working with. I could have done the same thing with, say, a tablespoon. It would have worked the same, or a teaspoon, or whatever it is you're working with. It's just the consistency, the proportions you put things together. And again, these are only guidelines, because once you get them put together, you may look at it and say, that's a little thin, that's a little thick, and then you just make your adjustments according to what you like. And ultimately, you get used to knowing what the consistencies look like and how those consistencies will act across whatever pouring surface you're going to be working with. I generally work with either canvas or a pouring board, which I do a cradle board that I make. And I mean, one time soon, spend some time and show you how I put those together. But let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do, this is my Valspar Ultra. Put it down a little bit. I may have to open a new can soon. But I get the Valspar at Lowe's, and they've been out several times recently. I keep at least a spare can in the back. You just never know. So this stuff comes and goes as they see fit. So let's start. This is one. And it's not, I mean, if I don't get it all out of there, that's fine. It's a generalization is to how much you get out of there. I try to get as much out of the ladle as I can. Some people go as far as to scrape it and make sure they get every drop. But it's, I'm pretty much, as long as I do it the same way every time I do it, I'm still getting the same proportions. And there's 3. I do small batches. The most I might do is a second group of 3 with this. So in this case, I'm going to leave that alone. I'll make it later. But there's my 3. Then I'll pick up my Valspar polyurethane triple thick, and I'll put 1 in there. In this case, it's about the same amount of both. I will scrape that. Waste not, want not. There's been times I've needed and wanted and didn't have, so I tend to be a little economical about this stuff. Okay, that's about it. Now, I just take that now and incorporate it, just like you would do in the kitchen. Incorporate it until it is one. You can tell by the feel of it when it's incorporated. Now the Valspar is actually thicker than what the triple thick Varathane is. So between the two, you come up with a good consistency. That's the consistency. I don't know if you can see that. Let me hold it up to it for you. That's the consistency I like. And then pretty much from there, anything mixed to is going to be the right consistency to pour with. So there's that one. Now, okay. Now I'm going to do that one more time. And one more time after I go off the camera so that I have a double batch. And that's pretty much how I do it. And it's about that much. It's about literally, I'm going to say that's maybe 3 ounces. But you know, whatever your proportions are, just keep them the same. Okay, that's my Valspar Varathane mixture. And I put it into a airtight container and it stays well. Usually my pouring mediums, I will use them for sometimes 2 and 3 weeks. I do enough painting that's actually 3 weeks, pushes it out to the extent to how long it lasts for me. I've never had a batch go bad, but I imagine if I waited a month, I might have to worry about that. So let's go and put things together, and I'll be right back, and we'll do my second pouring medium. Be right back. Okay, our next one is my Infinity Behr 8300 and Sonja varnish mix. This is sounds more complex, but it's mixed at a 2-1-1. So 2 parts of the Infinity to 1 part of the 8300 and 1 part of Sonja. So let's get started. Open up the cans. Now I use both of these that I've talked about today, depending on what I'm doing, and quite frankly, also depending on the weather. And you'll see the difference here in a few minutes, how the difference between the 3 or between the 2 are. There's also a recipe out that you'll hear people talk about where it's just the Infinity and the 8300. I find that to be a little too thick for me. So, but this is very personal. So whatever works for you. So let's start out, and you'll see why in a minute. I'm going to start out by putting the Sonja in. Now the Sonja, and I'll show you a better picture here in the at the beginning of this, what they look like. The Sonja is a varnish. I prefer the Sonja over a lot of different type of varnishes. A lot of people use the Minwax polyacrylic. It's thinner and it works, but I just find the Sonja dries a lot clearer. So for me, it dries clearer. So I'm going to add 1 part of the Sonja. The nice thing about doing my Sonja first, you'll see in a minute, when I go in and I take 1 part of the Behr. Now, I'll show you the Behr in a few minutes. This Behr, the thickness of this stuff is just, I mean, it's just plain goopy. It sticks to the, so it is goopy stuff. I don't know a better way to put it. It's very thick. So when I put the Sonja in first, it's like I've sprayed the pan before I cooked with it. That's very interesting because it just clips itself. Okay, I'm babbling. Let's go on. Next, down is my 2 parts of the Infinity. Now the Infinity, I'll show the cans and the base in a bit. The 8300 and the Infinity it's a Sherwin-Williams product, is it's clear. It's the Sherwin-Williams, the Infinity, is a base C. And the base C for the use of paint departments is used for darker colors, because darker colors need to have less of a, they don't want white in it. otherwise it diffuses the color. So this is what it's used for. We use it for very much the same reason. And number 2 on that. We use it for very much the same reason because it dries clear, although it looks white here, milky here. It dries clear, and it allows our pigments and our paints to be the color we want. They stay true. So that's the reason for it. Now you might be in an area where you can't get some of this stuff. You may not be able to get the Infinity. You may not be able to get the Sonja is available internationally, but the Behr, you get the Behr at Home Depot. And if you're in Germany, there is no Home Depot. If you're in Australia, the same is true. So you have to find those things that are available for you locally, so that you can get what you're looking for. So I'm going to mix this up. The best thing I can tell you is, if you understand what the properties of each one of the components is that you're trying to, and what you're trying to put together, you'll find that you can find something close to what you need. Before I moved here to Texas, I was living in Mexico. Mexico, finding latex paint was pretty close to, well, it was very difficult. But I did find a Sherwin-Williams store fairly close to where I lived. It was like 50 miles away, and was able to get some of the parts I needed. Some of the other parts that I needed, I muled in when I went back and forth to the United States. So, we work with what we have. We find workarounds for what we don't have, and it's a very individual thing. So you can tell now now notice that if you compare that to the last mix I did, that's quite a bit thicker. So there are times a year where you're going to want a thicker paint, or a style that you're working with, that you're going to want a thicker paint. So that's the reason why I keep both of them around. So that is the Infinity 8300 Sonja 211 mix. Again, I put a cap on, keep it air sealed, and it's good to go. So I'm hoping that part of it has been useful for you. There are lots of recipes out, and ultimately it comes down to what you need and what you're trying to work with. So if you ever have any questions, please leave those down in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer them, or at least I'll steer you in the right direction to find somebody who does have the answer. Jody Flynn, the Painted Dreamer, has done a whole series on mixes, pouring medium, and different things she uses in her arts. And she's been very giving of her time and her energies in sharing what she knows. So if you haven't checked out her channel, please do. She's a wealth of information, and there are plenty others that I could tout that I've just done very helpful. So let's see. I'm going to get to the next part. I would show you how I mix my tube paint and how I mix my my pigment. Now, they're both different because they start out in a different state. So I'm going to put you on pause real quick, and I'll bring that stuff up. So stay tuned for part 2. If you haven't done so, please give it a like, subscribe, and hit the bell for future notifications of videos that will be coming. Hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you tune in for the next one. Bye now.